AI is rewriting careers completely. These systems are here. They will more than likely knock out at least 50 to 60% of the workforce.
You got to that high level within your corporate role. You were working with hundreds of millions of dollars, but to you felt like, I'm bored of this. What's next? What can I do?
I've always chosen things that were more passion for me. Can't just do a job just because it pays me well. There's no way I'm going to stay there. I will teach people that technology will allow you to run your business faster. If your technology cannot communicate to the rest of the world, why are you building it?
Anie Akpe is a business leader, entrepreneur, and founder of African Women in Tech. She spent more than 25 years in banking, managing mortgage portfolios worth over $1 billion US. She has worked with global organizations including Google and SAP, bringing together technology, business, and opportunities.
You were born in Nigeria and moved to America at the age of 10. Then years later, you were managing a mortgage portfolio worth close to $1 billion. How did that move teach you about ambition, survival, and building a life?
When you're moving from one country to the next and you don't really speak the language, there's a whole new experience that you're going to have that others may not. All we could do was just sit and smile all the time when the students were trying to speak to us. But I think that's just kind of like the beauty in it, is that, you aren't able to communicate. So you start to think about different ways in which you can communicate. We still had our accent a little. So not only did I have to learn a different language, but then every 2 years we were moving to a different state. So
wow, that's a lot. Every 2 years, learning a language, trying to make friends, and then you're moving again.
Right, we're moving again. So, we lived in Tennessee, then we went to Louisiana for a few years, and then from there we lived in Kentucky for just a little bit, but then we ended up in Minnesota. These communities weren't necessarily Nigerian, though my parents had Nigerian friends and people they could speak the language with. But we as kids didn't know anything. We were meeting people who we were like, okay, they're white. You know what I mean? Coming from Nigeria they shifted you from
completely different
culture, U.S. culture, number one. So you really didn't fit in. Then Louisiana culture. But then you end up in Minnesota, and that's, a totally different culture altogether. So I think that what I learned in those earlier years was that I had to be adaptable. I had to change, and I had to be okay with making friends and knowing that I may not see them again, over the years. But when I went to college in Atlanta, then I learned the Black culture. I had roommates that took me out to eat mac and cheese because, Nigerian household, you're not eating mac and cheese.
You're not having mac and cheese. No.
You're not having anything that resembles things. The only thing you're having is pounded yam, jollof rice, and a typical whatever you eat. Ching ching was a favorite highlight if mom made it, right? Mm-hmm. So now here it is, a Black culture. And in Atlanta, I really learned everything that there was to learn about the Black culture, because naturally I was accepted in, and they wanted to learn from me just as much as I was learning from them.
And you were climbing the corporate ladder once you got into your career, whilst also building your own companies. How were you able to do both at the same time?
Sometimes I ask myself the same question every day for a long time. What I felt like happened there is that when you're a creative person and you're in corporate America would only hold your interest but for so long. It actually became unnecessary. When you hit a certain glass ceiling in corporate America, and at the time I was already a vice president. I was in my 30s. And I realized that after a year or two of being in my position that I was not going to move any time soon. And I think that was 2 years into my VP position. My boss already said he was retiring there. So that meant 20 years from now. So you learn that you could stay there and just maximize yourself. I set up technology systems so that it made it more efficient. I was able to manage those pipelines a lot easier. So I could see things and do things, and I'm giving myself away in less than 15, 20 hours a week, only because I had mastered my job. So now we take that and we're pushing out, 80 million, 120 million, 150 million a month. We shifted over to, okay, I'm bored. In the middle of all of that, I'm bored. Like, this is it. This is all life has to offer me. Maybe it's time for me to give back. So I started attending events, right? My parents have always owned their business, but going in and seeing people my age, doing impact work, I was like, wow, maybe I should really consider what I want to do. Who do I want to give back to? And who do I want to be impacted once I start to do the work?
I think it's so interesting, the fact that you're saying you got to that high level within your corporate role. You were working with hundreds of millions of dollars, but to you, you felt like, I'm bored of this. What's next? What can I do next?
Right. And a lot of people may not understand it, but I've always chosen things that were more passion for me. I can't lead any other way. So I can't just do a job just because it pays me well. There's no way I'm going to stay there just because after I've mastered it, I'm looking at it like, what is this? So for me, I felt that, mortgage is a passion. I could create products. I could educate people. I could show people how to actually get into their house, especially in the US, if that's a big challenge, for people. It's like all these loopholes that happens within the system. I had figured out what people needed and I had already created it. So it was at that height that I realized there's nothing else that you're going to do here. And I think that getting to that point was me deciding that I wasn't going to be there anymore before I even got to the millions. I came in the door and I noticed that their systems weren't as up to date as I would have wanted for where I wanted to work at for the next few years. And some of the policies that they had was antiquated. So I had already made up my mind to leave that company long before the first month of being there. And when they realized that I was leaving, just because I had gotten another corporate job, that's when they offered me the position. And within the position, before I took it, I gave him a list of things that I wanted before I took that position. Otherwise, why stay and be unhappy, or why lose your skill sets, or why lose your momentum? So I was like, first of all, I need a staff. Second of all, I need new systems. Third, we need to be more engaged in the community. So I'm going to need more staff to be doing the business development. He's like, you have anything you want. You're just not getting staff just because the numbers aren't showing it. So I said, oh, okay, that's what it takes. Bet. Next thing you know,
I love that. Bet. I'm going to do it.
right. Once he approved the systems and they were only closing like 30, 40 million a year. Once he approved the new system, we went up to like 80 million a year in that first year. And then from there, it just kept growing and tripling in numbers. So we went from a staff of like maybe 10 to 42 by the time I left. So in just, the type of growth that we had. So that's why when we come back to, I'm bored, it's just because the challenges were what systems you need to fix that.
A lot of your work comes back to one thing, economic freedom. And for you, technology is a big part of that. Why tech? Why did that become the thing you wanted women to understand?
It goes back to understanding that technology was just the things that created the type of efficiency or allowed you to move faster. When they gave me that position and said no staff, I said, okay, well, I like technology anyway. Let's see how technology can give me the ability to move faster, right? So it was almost like, I'll show you type of attitude. So when I was able to implement and to see the end result and be able to prove my end result, it floored everyone. Because remember, people are not gunning for you. I feel like sometimes jobs hire you and they don't want you to succeed because with your success, you're now improving the people that were there, that they were incapable of doing what you were doing. I knew that I had the ability to have all access, all open roads to what I wanted when it came to technology. So why not pick out the best systems in less than, a year to two, where they're making triple what they made before? Then what does that say for everyone else who doesn't know it? Will they ever make it? Technology is the ability to make it. Do they have access to it? Do they even understand it? Do they know what it can do for them? Again, with my questions in my head, I started saying, this is what I'll do. Wow, okay. I will teach people that technology will allow you to run your business faster, and you need to make sure you're implementing it in any component of whatever you develop.
You were able to get to the top in terms of the role that you were doing as vice president, and then you decided to move on and get into tech. But globally, women are just 28% of the tech workforce and far fewer are at the top. What do you think keeps that door shut?
I think the fact is that whether we admit it or not, we're always going to be in some type of matriarchal system. And men will always be seen as the breadwinner. So with that being said, then, and some people would even say it's an unconscious bias. People like, oh, you're aware of what you are, what you're doing, the impact you're making. No, some people don't necessarily see that. They just do it unconsciously. And I'm not giving them an excuse. It just means that they never looked beyond, what was comfortable for them. And, the situation and scenarios that they grew up in, we all bring those things to wherever we work or whatever projects we choose to develop or build or even fund. So those things go into play and, it gets dismissed. But for the most part, it is something that, we say that, hey, men are going to be in a lot of your fields to where you may not be able to stay within that field just because it's male centered. I think some people just naturally gravitate towards what's comfortable for them and they're not recognizing it. So they build from that component.
Do you think it's changing, though, from when you started years ago in the tech sector? Are you seeing more women getting into top roles, or has it remained the same?
It has changed and, more women being in companies that make a lot of decisions on whom they're going to invest in. It has changed a little bit in funding. It's not a huge percentage. Those numbers are still very low. A percentage of women getting funded is in some countries less than 5%, so the numbers are not really telling you a bigger story. You just see that it inches up a little. But within it, women learned how to adapt. So we started building bootstrapping. Um, we started talking to our communities in order to raise funds for what we wanted to have an impact in. So I truly believe that overall, it has grown. We have more visibility. You're able to see more women making impact. But in terms of funding, it's still far, far, far from being equal.
It is. And Africa produces more women STEM graduates than any other region in the world, yet they get just 1% of tech funding. Why do you think that is? Why is it so low?
I still believe that whether, again, with that unconscious bias, you grow up believing that, women don't deserve their spot, but you don't think of it like that. You don't say, oh, they don't deserve their spot. You may think of it as like, they might get married. They might have children, that's still, bias within our culture. So when you're funding a project, a lot of people will still think that way. They may not take this as serious. So, and also, some women have just checked out because they've tried different ways and everything is a shutdown. So then they shut down. They start saying, you know what, let me just go do something else. Most of the people getting picked is still 70% led organizations. And it doesn't mean that those organizations are coming out with more brilliant ideas. It just means that that was just the preference at the time. There's so many women-led organizations right now that are supporting other women. So why aren't you partnering with those organizations? So you submitted 100 pitches, no one's giving you any feedback, and you think your product's a failure, when in reality, your product just needed to be examined. Some of us don't listen to no's. Like I don't listen to no's. I thank you, but I don't listen to no. So I'm going to build around you. And if I can't build around you, so people like myself come in and say to the women, you can do it. Don't listen to anyone. This is how you do it.
And for those who might hear a no and think, that's it, I'm giving up, I'm not going to carry on, What advice would you give to them to just go around that no as you say that you do?
Well, because for some people it's such a shock, that they
You can be put off when you hear no. You just think, okay, fine, I've tried.
right, right. And it's such a shock. And you've put your whole person into this, and it might be your final no, after you've heard 20 other no's. So you're just like, maybe whatever I'm building is just really not needed. Maybe it's just, something that I thought was valuable and it doesn't have value. This is not true. Um, I think that before you get into anything, you first have to know yourself. For some people, 5 no's will take them down. For other people, it's 1,000 no's. As an entrepreneur, that's when you need to know yourself the most, just because you need to recognize your own weaknesses and what you're going to do from that weakness standpoint. For me, one of my weaknesses is knowing that I'm always going to need someone to just double check behind me. So I recognize that as a weakness within myself because I get so busy with so many different projects that I need assistance, right? So I need to move from that standpoint. Whereas others never take the time to examine, who they are, what they are. And if you don't take that time, entrepreneurship teaches it to you the hard way. It's not just the business that's going to be changed. You're going to be changed.
I've interviewed hundreds of people, and when it comes to leadership, mentorship always comes up. You mentor a lot of women. What's the advice you find yourself repeating the most?
Continue education or continuing education, however way, continuing education, whichever way we want to say it. You have to master the art of wanting to learn. And I'm in the same boat. So even though I dish it out, but ultimately I recognize that if I'm not constantly learning, it's almost like I've come into a standstill. Technology forces that. We talked about my early childhood where we're constantly moving or constantly learning new things. It's the same with tech. The only difference is systems, software systems, where you're having to currently, always challenge yourself, always learning new things. So that's the adaptability factor that comes into play. You may even switch out of your current career just because you learned something, or it may force you into entrepreneurship faster just because your vision became more clear. So whenever you're uncertain of which direction to go in, learn a new trade. That new trade is going to push you faster into what you should be doing.
You knew when you were ready to leave your role, but when you're in a job, a room, or an environment, how do you know when it's no longer serving you?
It's so funny because I think that we are all creatures of comfort.
We really are creatures of habit and comfort.
If you're a creature of comfort, you're not going to make a change right away. You just don't do it because you're comfortable. So I think the biggest thing is that the moment that you start complaining about your job more than the positives of your job, it's time for you to reevaluate. And it's so simple because we think, oh, we're just venting, we're just venting the experience. No, those experiences accumulate. There's things that are just, office BS. And then there's things that's impactful to who you are, which is why I always go back to who are you? Know yourself, right? As they always say, darling, who are you? So when you know yourself, you're able to separate the difference. Like this is just a complaint and a feature of what I'm doing right now, just because I'm frustrated and I need to get this out so that I can make better decisions. For some people, you understand it. You don't want to make a change right now. That's fine. It's okay, but recognize it for what it is because this certain set of circumstances will always come back. It'll keep repeating itself until you finally make a decision. One thing about life that I had to learn in my older years is that everything is a pattern. So why not make that change? Don't wait until something comes along and it all changes anyway. Make the change because you made it.
And you've spent years trying to make sure women are not left out of where the world is going. And now I want to move on to AI because AI is changing everything. What worries you most about people choosing to sit this moment out?
Okay, so the reason why I push AI, just like I push any other tech, is when you recognize the long term impact. Like blockchain, for example. I recognize long-term impact coming from a banking background, knowing that the banking system is going to again be turned upside down. So now I'm like, oh my goodness, there's going to be people left behind if they don't start trying to understand it now, because people think things change overnight, but they don't. Once you've knocked it out of your mind as not something for me to worry about, you'll never pay attention to it again until it's implemented globally. Didn't mean actions weren't happening in the background. Now we get to AI. AI is rewriting careers completely. AI could create these type of interviews. And for us who can detect it, we're fine. But there's going to become a point where we can't detect it, and it could run a lot more things than what we like it to. I think that not paying attention to what you can do within AI, not paying attention to how it's creating efficiency for your job. And then lastly, not understanding that even though these systems are here, they will more than likely knock out at least 50 to 60% of the workforce, just because of how it's being utilized right now. So,
Wow, fifty to 60% of the workforce
Mhm.
could be knocked out
Right,
because of AI.
right.
In what types of industries?
Um, Amazon laid off 17,000 people. Most of the tech companies have laid off 30 to 40,000 people in masses and grows. We're not really talking about it because we've become numb to some of these changes. We're looking at it as like, oh, a different set of reasons why people are getting laid off. But the reality is, it's because technology has stepped into the game, and that technology is some form of AI. Now, AI will create some type of jobs as well, because someone has to do quality control. We know that AI doesn't always tell the truth. So someone has to be able to do the research on that material to make sure, is this actually true, you know? So it will create a different set of jobs. But initially, the impact to the job market is going to be very great, because corporations like to use things that are easier. It's not people. So, it's a tech again, and technology fills those gaps for them. Most of the time, when people look at it now and they're like, wow, I didn't know it could do this, so it actually helped them to move a lot faster. As a person that has always looked at businesses and helping entrepreneurs, a lot of the thought processes, a lot of the design concepts, a lot of the things that a mentor would ask you, or an executive would ask you, AI is able to be forefront. So you're able to get your questions answered, bounce off ideas. So choosing not to learn it at this stage is actually pushing yourself further out of a market that's already shrinking in terms of employment.
You created African Women in Tech. Why did you create it and what was its main purpose?
So being in New York, I mentioned from like being the corporate and hitting that glass ceiling. I started IBOM LLC initially, which was to train the diaspora and helping them to understand how tech tools could help advance their careers, and how they needed to build in the technology sector. So while that was happening, I decided to take a trip to Nigeria. And in that trip, I said, oh, there's conferences. Since I'm teaching people about, being global, it's great for me to talk to other partners in Nigeria, but it's time for me to go. I went to Nigeria and I went to one event. And in that event, nothing but men. This is over 10 years ago. Everything was just men. That's all I saw. There were no women. And I was so disappointed, because I'm like, there's tons of women making impact in this sector there, whether they're in your communications or some engineering here and there. Where are these women? So when I recognized that being in Nigeria, I said, okay, you know what? Let me build something that's going to highlight us and let us know that we exist. Because for some people, that visibility of only seeing men is intimidating. They may not step further just because they see it as a challenge and they don't want that type of challenge in their life. So they'll fall back. And then there's me that's like, wait, what are y'all thinking? Is not like, this is not how that works. Let's make sure that everyone gets a chance to be seen. So we started hosting events that had African women. Me looking back from 10 years ago, over 10 years ago when I started African Women in Tech, I believe that the greatest impact was being able to show women that anything you do is possible. And even though you don't have funding, it's still possible, because you're still going to bootstrap and you're still going to build and go forward. So African Women in Tech was set out to just create the visibility for women and to give them access and opportunities to training that they wouldn't have had before.
Building rarely looks glamorous at the beginning, and a lot of women are building slowly without funding, without a big team, without applause. What does that teach us about not waiting for permission and just starting?
It teaches us that you have to be bold, you know. And if you are the type of person that's like, no, I don't want that. I don't want to be out there. It's not for you. Because this requires you to be bold. You have to go out there. This requires you to walk into rooms that you're like, I don't really fit in, but let me just go socialize. You have to force yourself to do things. There, even now, like people are like, oh, you're so used to it. You've been doing it for so long. No, I still walk in rooms where I'm like, okay, all right, chin up, Ani. You got to go meet people. You got to go give out your business. It's not every time that I'm walking in there with oh, this is so easy. Never. I still have to walk in and talk to people. I still have had thousands of speeches where I'm on stage and still get tongue tied when I get back on stage. It's a forever thing. You have to get outside of your comfort zone and say to yourself, I'm going to do this and accomplish this no matter what. Once you've honed in on that, it doesn't matter where you go. You walk into the room, you can ask them anything.
But for the woman with an idea but no money, no network, what are three practical ways she can start?
Well, I always believe that when you're starting, always go to to the basics. There's meetup groups. Meetup groups are the basics of any culture. I think it's global, for the most part. And meetups groups are smaller, so you're not having to go into this big open event space and there's so many people. Check out the meetup groups in your community. They're smaller, they're usually like less than 30 people. The second thing is set goals for yourself when you get there. How many people am I going to talk to? Always have that goal in mind before you walk in. Get used to going into the mirror and talking to yourself. Get used to practicing in front of the mirror. People think you're crazy, or you may be like, I'm being silly. No, 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 no. Get used to how you talk so that you don't think you look crazy or you don't think you said something crazy. Just practice.
I want to finish with 5 quick fire questions, if that's okay.
Sure, no problem.
Great. Okay. Number one, what are 3 things every woman should learn about tech this year?
First, study what careers AI is going to knock out. Go and learn. Make sure you've highlighted it and then turn around and learn what new careers are going to be created within it. Even if you have a job, even if you're established, just learn. Make sure you understand what technology is doing. The second thing is I'm going to go back to blockchain. Money moves in various ways. The market is weird right now. There's a whole war going on. And within that war, it's going to impact a lot of sectors. Learn what's happening in your economies to see if something did happen in the country that you're in, how would it impact you? The last thing is study your industry. I don't care what you're building. I've always said go back and study whatever industry you're in. Learn to see how things are going to change and why it's changing.
And number 2, for the woman who says, I'm too late for tech, what would you say to her?
You have stopped yourself from being able to grow. You've put limits on yourself, and that's as far as you're going to go. So if you recognize that that's what you've done, step out of that and, say, all right, well, what areas of tech do I have interest in? It might be you love makeup, you love makeup so much that you're like, I really would want to see what makeup product that I could use that would make me look a particular way. Well, maybe it's AI facial recognition you're trying to build a platform for that allows you to see what you look like when you're able to play with systems. Because the AI as it is free. You could still look at it and see what you can create now. But imagine if you went into it and you started to create based on the things that you liked. Always start with what is a passion for you. There's so many free things in this world that if you say you can't do it, it's because you chose to. And that's your limited belief.
Number 3, what is one skill that will make women more money in the next 5 years?
I believe it's the ability to understand how money moves. And that goes back to blockchain or crypto or any of those things. So long as you're able to understand how money moves, that will always tell you what you need to be in or what you need to create. Money movement, as a person is in the financial sector and pays attention to how money moves, money will always tell me what country is going to be doing what first, based on what they're creating and what they've given money to create. It also will tell you what projects are being funded. Okay, there's $1 billion going into learning robotics and agritech. Why? You know, what's happening in the industry? Why is agriculture so important right now? The things that you learn of why money is moving is how you will know what's going to be impacted in any sector. And once you're able to tap into what you really like to do, then use that concept to focus in on how money is moving in that particular sector for you. That's how you learn where the opportunities are. That's how you learn what you're going to build. And even if you're building in that, what you need to add on. Pay attention to how money moves.
What are 3 signs you're playing too small?
Um, the three signs that you're playing too small, because I tend to do that sometimes, is number one, saying, no, they don't really want to hear me. Convincing yourself that what you're saying is not important. So you tap out and you don't even try to go into it. The second thing is being lazy about what you want. We tend to think that things should just come to us because we are who we are. Well, who are you? You know, no one cares. No one really cares who you are. And not to be mean, it's just that they have so many other things to care about. Why should they care about you specifically? This is why you need to care about you. Because once you care about you, you're going to put yourself there. The last thing is stop with the limiting belief systems. And I always have to go back to this, sorry, but I just believe that we are our own worst enemy. And we create situations and roadblocks for ourselves. It's not juju, it's not this, it's not that, it's not all these things that we look at and say externally that's what's happening. Because internally you set the tone. You set the tone for anything that happens in your life. So why not set the tone and make it more positive? Why not set the tone to say, I'm going to set a goal of this year of having maybe 200 people in my community? You might have only started with 2 people. You know, set realistic goals and make sure they're touch points where you can make a landmark.
And finally, complete this sentence. The future belongs to women who.
Build it.
Yes, I love it. Build it.
You have to build what you want. It's not always going to be available. There's no cookie cutter for it. Build it.
Ani, thank you so much. I feel like I've learned so much in this conversation. So thank you for sharing your journey, for sharing your insights, and for taking the time to come on.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I always love being interviewed by Lisa. We've interviewed so many years ago, so to come back full circle is a great moment. So thank you for having me.